In this episode, we sit down with Tony from Redlight Food Plot Seed Company. We talk about everything you need to know for food plots, from beginners to experts. You're going to walk away from this episode with great information to use this season. All this and more on this episode of Beyond the Backyard.
Michigan Outdoor Obsessions Beyond the Backyard is brought to you by Ultimate Archery and Outdoors, Ultimate Deer Products, Redlight Food Plot Seed Company, Edge Attracts Incorporated, Jay's Sporting Goods, and Tacticam.
Another episode number 7 of Beyond the Backyard. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate Archery Outdoors, Ultimate Deer Products, Redlight Food Plot Seed Company, Edge Attracts Incorporated, Tacticam, and Jay's Sporting Goods. Tony, what's going on, man?
Not much, Steve. How are you?
Getting ready for Memorial Weekend. How about you?
Yep. Doing the same. So
Doing the old barbecue this weekend?
I don't know about barbecue. It's supposed to be like 60, but yeah. No, family's coming over and whatnot. So I'm sure we'll spend time outside and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's always good to have a three-day weekend. Although a lot of people a lot of times forget that it's not about a lot of blood was shed in order for them to have a 3-day weekend. So
Yeah. Yep.
can't forget the real reason why we even have this holiday, or this, I don't know if I call it a holiday, but this time off. There's a lot of stuff had to happen that was bad in order for it to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
But anyways, I would like I think we've had a lot of different people that have talked about either people that already do food plots, people that would like to get into food plots, maybe because of the baiting situation currently. And there's no better person to talk to than you, who own a food plot company and seed company, Red Light Food Plot Seed Company. And I figured you could really help people out, not only the ones that are just getting started into the food plot game, but people that kind of want to expand their knowledge a little more. So, what is your experience with the food plot industry, and maybe we can start there and we'll go on.
I mean, we talked a little bit about it in a couple episodes ago. I got, went and did some studying or whatever through Michigan State and whatnot, and went and discovered through their ag corp or their ag program, the wildlife conservation side of everything, and just that interests me a ton. So then I just carried that on into hunting and whatnot. So, and then from there, I just started developing and try to understand the whole dynamic of all the different types of seeds and whatever, and all the uses for, what seed or what plants work best for the wildlife, the certain kind of species, um, the strategies behind building a food plot, um, just the different dynamics of them, and so on and so forth.
Do-
So,
Now, my first question going into food plots, is there a difference in what someone should plant when they're dealing with 5, 10, 20 acres compared to 100, 200, 300 acres?
yeah, I mean, for the most part, based on your acreage, you got to kind of figure out the size of the food plot you want to build. Now, on a smaller portion of a property, say 10 acres or so, it's best to just have one, let's say half acre or even up to an acre food plot. Now, a lot of people get into too many food plots all over the property, and that's okay when you have more than, let's say, 50 to 100 acres or whatever. Once you start getting into that, I mean, obviously it gives it more area for having animals to have, you know, the section of property that's for bedding, the section of property for browsing, and so on and so forth. Um, so based on the property size, I would say the more property you have to, mostly it's 10% of your property should be some type of food source. So it's kind of the rule of thumb for that. So
And and also, I mean, obviously, it's where you're at in the state. There's so many different areas, whether you're in
yeah,
the UP or northern Michigan like me, where there isn't a ton of farmland
right.
compared to you run down state by you, and there's soybeans and corn everywhere you look. So I mean, it
Yeah.
really changes up the dynamic of basically probably what you want to plant or how big you want to plant.
Yeah. Um, it is kind of more difficult when you have a ton of ag around you because the food source is already there. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, when you do hunt ag, it's one certain kind of plant, so it's usually either corn or soybeans. So not to go away from having a food plot, off of that food source, but if you had some type of let's say if you're trying to use it specifically for hunting, if you could have some type of like a brassica or grain and you're hunting soybean fields, obviously soybeans are going to get cut early in the season. So as long as you had that food source going into late season, when we get into or firearm season and that late doe and everything, then the deer will transition into your food plot where you want them to be. So I mean there is some advantages to having a food plot in the ag areas. So now for you and your area, I mean, having a food source, I mean, once you have a food source, you kinda have control of the
Yeah,
deer in that area because 'cause they're obviously animals have to eat, so
yeah.
that's where the advantage is to you guys up north
And I've
versus down
noticed
here.
too, though. I know last year I planted your was it Field Perfection? I think it was, or Food Chain.
It was one of the food chains, I forgot what I think it was the Field Perfection,
Yeah,
yeah.
your Field Perfection, the mix of brassica,
Yep.
and it was like this. It grew, 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 and as soon as they found that thing, man, you couldn't keep them out of it. It was,
Yeah.
I mean,
Ye
they were there
Yeah,
all night eating
yeah.
that.
Yep. So, that one, I took some time on making that one just because I wanted something that would last and gave us, the best, um, uh, trying to think of the word here, you know, best diversity in, having grains and, brassicas mixed together that kinda complement each other so you can have, you know, multiple different foods in one area, so it gives you, yeah, that better
Now,
attraction piece
now,
to
if
it.
you have somebody that only has one food plot, if they're only gonna have one food plot on their property,
Yep.
is there any recommendation that you would make as far as what it should be? You know what I'm
Um,
saying? Like,
well,
do they want to go brassicas? Do they want to go clover? Do they want to do? I mean, what do you
so
recommend?
so sometimes it's a personal preference thing, but you gotta think of what you're gonna use that food plot for too. So if you're more of a bow hunter, the early season, you want more legumes like soybeans or clover or alfalfa. Just the deer are gonna hit that more in the early season just because the
Mm,
protein level and whatnot that deer are looking for, those plants offer that. Now we get into, late bow or firearm season, late doe, they're going to transition to more of the carbohydrates like the corns and the grains and brassicas, just
mm.
because that's what the deer are starting to transfer to build up fat for the winter, and the carbohydrates for the energy. So it's kind of, you have to understand what you're making the food plot for. And there's some food plots that people make that are specifically they just stay away from until that certain time of year, and then they'll hunt those. So sometimes you got to understand why you're building the food plot. Is it for hunting? Is it for nutrition to build, the deer herd up? I mean, those are things you've got to figure out before you even put or start breaking the dirt up. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of times
and the
stuff like brassica just becomes a fancy thing. Like everyone wants to plant brassicas, and they don't. Maybe like you said, maybe they don't really know why they're planting it. Maybe they're doing it just because it seems like the cool thing to do.
more popular food plots to plant, I mean, when you see a brassica plot and it really grows, it looks pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But there is some I've had it where deer don't go to that just because they're either A, it's an unknown food source to them because it's so new and
Hmm.
you just planted it there. And it's going to take them a little bit to, start getting more comfortable going to it. Now, the big things, clovers are all any most clovers are kind of a good thing to always go towards just because deer, um it's the nutrition value and the attraction value. Clover's pretty hard to beat. So, um, and then for Michigan, lots of people run to the grains, the oats,
Hmm.
winter rye, wheat, all that. Those are always great options too. So, the best thing I can say is buy a buy a quality mix, um, and definitely look at what is in each mix. The biggest thing I see in some of the mixes is they try to throw too much stuff that either A is gonna get burnt out by frost, the first frost is gonna kill it all off, or they try to put too much in there where each plant or plant species that's in that mix sometimes doesn't complement each other.
Yeah.
So it can actually have a
Well,
negative
some of the
effect.
mixes
So
just are horrible in the fact that there's no, like, you got stuff that's huge in there, like a bigger seed mixed
yep,
with tiny seeds, and so then
yeah.
you're
It,
trying to do your seed, either you're putting yourself so small that at the end you all have the big seeds sitting in the bottom of your spreader,
yep,
or you do the opposite way where you're putting way too much out of your brassica or your clover, all the little seeds. So I feel like
yeah,
I see a lot of these companies that do that where it looks cool on a package, it sounds good in nature, but when it comes to actually spreading the seed out, it just doesn't come out at a nice even rate.
correct. And that does happen. So um most companies will try to find out the rate of mixture and whatnot for whatever you're trying to plant. So there will be some small seeds in there. Um, you know, you got to understand seed rating too. Some of those bags kind of look more towards using drills, no-till drills and everything.
Mhm.
And the seeding rate is definitely different between a no-till drill and a hand spreader or broadcasting. Usually broadcasting, you're going to need a little bit of more because not my walking versus your walking, you could go off faster than me, and then we all have different rates of speed on how we spin the spinner and everything. So usually you want a little bit more if you're going to broadcast seed than you do with drilling or using a planter. So that's why a lot of my mixes I try to do more towards the broadcasting side because the average person really doesn't have a drill because they're
No,
extremely expensive. So
no.
so I try to push more towards putting the right amount for using it for broadcasting. So the average guy here that wants to put one way back in the woods can use it and have the correct rate and the correct amount of seed and everything. So
Now, with all your different seed types, I think the biggest question I hear in the hunting community is such a different of when they should plant the different mixes, different types of stuff. There's like a fine balance there because you have planted too early. And then I've had people plant so early that it rotted in the food plot before it even
hmm
became deer season. You plant it at a bad point and you've hit that dry spell. It seems like what, July? Usually there's a kind of a dry spell.
it seems to
So
be, yeah.
based on the state, let's start with brassica. When's a good time to think about planting it based on like northern Michigan compared to southern Michigan?
So and that can vary too by the year. So sometimes we have an early fall or early spring or a late fall. Um, so kind of guess. So most of the time I kind of use usually around like US 10 and I use like the rifle country or the rifle border for Michigan. If you can get like your brassicas, kind of start shooting towards like late July, beginning of August, somewhere in there,
Mhm.
it's a pretty safe time to try to beat drought and to um, have your a good enough growth and just so you're not too far behind either.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, if you want to bow hunt, at least you'll have some type of food source there
I've
too.
seen a lot of people in northern
Um,
Michigan. I feel like that playing Nebraska way too late. Like I feel like they're playing the
yeah,
end of August to the point where those leaves never even get a chance to really build up and get big.
yeah, well, it yes and no. It depends on the variety of brassica too. Sometimes like the turnips and the radishes and that kind of stuff, they're gonna take a little bit bigger to develop the bulbs and everything to get
Mhm,
bigger. So, and that's based off of the nutrients in the soil and how well your food plot's gonna do too. So,
mhm.
um, when it comes to grains are they don't take long to get established, and that's the one I see the most of people screwing up. They always wanna start early. Grains can be start, like, middle of August, beginning of September, and you're still gonna be good because you want grains to be lower and
Yeah.
they'll keep growing. So, like
Tender.
winter,
Yep.
yes, you want them tender. You don't wanna get them where they start growing up and the, um, wheat comes into the dough stage where the awn starts coming off. Deer will eat them, but it's it's gonna be really late in the season, and it's kinda gonna be like kind of the last hit
Mhm.
kinda food. So, you want it low and lush for the, grains. Um, Clover clover, you gotta start early because clover takes a long time to get established. It's got a root system that's gotta get established first before it starts delivering shoots off of that. Um, so clover, you wanna start early. Um, Screening mixes too, if you're gonna do some type of annual screen, or if you're gonna do like a sorghum plot, that seems to be a new thing too, is,
Yeah.
sorghum plots. Um, you wanna
I
get
know I know
those.
last year when I did your border mix, was it hide and seek? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, yep.
And I planted that, I think, on Father's Day, if I remember right.
Okay.
Uh,
Yep.
and I did the 4-foot pass, whatever, around the food plot.
Yep.
And then I think I planted my other one maybe in, and like you said,
I
end of
think
July.
July. Yep.
And that stuff was, I mean, you saw the pictures. That stuff was 10 feet
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah. Yeah. I got that. Yes. The seeds we use in there, if you put the nitrogen to it, it'll grow pretty tall. So,
Yeah.
um, I I wanted to use more of an annual. Well, I'm kind of getting off topic here, so uh, let's go back to the other one about
Okay. Yep.
Let, so if you're gonna do some type of annual screening, you want to start it when the ground's getting about 65 degrees or warmer because it's a warm season grass, and so don't want to start it when it's cold just because that seed's gonna either A, go dormant or die, or so you wanna do it when the ground's getting warm. So you wanna do it after the last frost, and I usually say probably even after Memorial Day. You probably should be safe where the ground's warm enough to start putting in an annual screen. And that's a lot of guys do switchgrass and whatnot, and you can frost seed switchgrass, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I try to tend to shoot for once the ground starts getting warmer to start doing those um, screening or border mixes, just because it's got a better time to establish when the ground's warmer and really get its um, you know grab a hold of the ground there. So,
Now speaking,
but
while we're on the topic of borders, I
hmm
know that it's kind of a new thing that's been coming in the last couple of years. What it like let people know that don't know about borders, or maybe people that have just kind of seen them in, here and
hmm
there on different articles. What is the best way to use a border? I mean, in your opinion.
Okay. So, 2 types of things that you wanna use a border for. It's either for the deer or for yourself. That's what you're gonna do. So, you have to decide even before you wanna even start building your food plot in
Mhm,
general, is you wanna set your borders first and then your plot second type thing, because obviously the borders are what's going to kind of create your outlines or how you're actually going to build that plot. So if you're going to build it for the deer and you're going to start doing rows and cutting the plot off so bucks can have to check each plot, or um, do it for more of the security reasons. So, say you got an open field and you want to cut that open field so you can give the deer more of a security feel, you know, understand where you're going to put your screening mix per se.
mhm.
Um, so that's for the deer side. Now, for you, is understanding your travel route to your stand, or to give yourself the best option to hide so you can get in and out of the stands without scaring deer off, um, and giving you the security away from the deer. So, um, I mean, those are the 2 reasons why you wanna really set up that. So, I've had a couple guys even this past year order some of that, and all their with my, hide and seek mix there, and they order it more for the sorghum. So if you're gonna make a border, you wanna make it thick or screening or anything. Now, if you're gonna build a sorghum food plot, you wanna do it at a lighter rate. So, There you are.
Sorry, I
I
lost
lost
you
you
for
for a
a
sec.
second
No,
there.
that's okay. So if you're gonna do it like a sorghum plot and have that kind of stuff, you want to go at a lighter rate. And if you want it more for the screening or cover side, go at a little bit thicker rate, just because you want that more dense cover
Yeah.
versus when you're trying to do it for food, you want it more widespread out so the deer can kind of work their way through the plot. So
And I made a mistake last year when I did it. I tried to make doorways, kind of
yeah.
spots. I should have made them bigger,
Hmm.
and I figured, well, they'll
Yeah.
they'll come through, and they kept growing back
Yeah.
in. And I noticed without good, clear entryways into it, like we talked about it, I had little bucks come into it and does, but no big bucks at all. And the
Yeah,
year
it just makes
before,
them nervous. Yeah.
yeah, the year before that licking branch I had in there, they would hit it nonstop all season. They didn't hit it once. And as
Yeah.
soon
It
as the snow started knocking down that border and it got thinner and they could see through it, then they started coming in.
yeah. It's in that comes down to that's why I would almost anybody that's gonna do borders, I always say try to use an annual mix first to see how like, for your instance, how the deer react to a border. Because I'd rather see you use an annual, see how they react, and if it's positive, then go, "Okay, maybe next year, let's start putting in a perennial," like, maybe start adding switchgrass or miscanthus or some
Yeah.
type of other plant so you can start incorporating it. But and you're saying, "Hey, I screwed up. I thought I could create doorways and stuff, and then it had a I wouldn't say a negative effect, but not as good of what you were gonna think." And
Yeah.
um, basically, so but it's an annual, so it'll next year you don't have to worry about regrowth.
No.
So
No.
you can try a different option this year. There, maybe don't do like all your plot with that border. Maybe
Yeah.
do half of it or sections of it. So
Like you
that's
said,
the
just the side that maybe I'm going to walk in on.
yeah, yeah, yep. Use it for you and not the deer, and that might help tremendously because
Yeah.
bucks always want to see if there's does in the plot. The buck's always gonna take his time getting in. He's gonna scent check everything. He
Yeah.
wants to see stuff. So, and then maybe that's what made the bigger guys nervous around your plot is they couldn't see into the plot. They had to make their ways around
And they
before they
and
entered the
those
food
big
plot, and
boys
then
aren't they're not big for no and for any reason.
yeah. Oh,
So
that's
I mean,
well,
they're
yeah.
not going to step in. They're not
That's
going to step into
yeah.
the unknown
Yep.
just to get killed. So I mean, there's
Y
a reason.
Yep. They're playing it safe, so
Now you have a new mix out that I've never. I think it's kind of new to the industry the way you did it. What is it called? Frostbites.
the frostbites?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts behind that whole seed mix?
So, I wanted to create something that if somebody wanted different food plots all year long, this one will create is the winter side of things. So it's got winter peas and a bunch of different grains in it. And all these different grains are specifically for staying established all through the winter time. So brassicas do a pretty good job at lasting through the winter, but they'll eventually rot out and whatnot. So frostbites has got more grains in it to carry you between that winter into springtime. You'll have that green lush grains that'll stay low and they'll carry you into that springtime. And then it's easily you can terminate it pretty easily. So if you were gonna do some type of, you know, clover plot to the next year in there, you can either round up it or use clethodim, and then
Mhm.
you can just get rid of it. And to I kind of use that if you wanted to create a, clover plot, you could overseed into the this frostbites, have food through the winter, and then in the springtime the clover will start coming up through that, and then you can basically
You're
use
building
this to
organic
start
matter
your
too.
yeah, yep, you're building organic matter. Your clover's going to start coming up. You can terminate the grains in that frostbite and then overseed it with clover, and now you got a clover plot. So it's the continuous cycle of having food there for the deer to eat or
Now, as
wildlife in
far
general.
as
So
far as the building the soil matter and all that, what is your thought?
mhm.
You've heard different people talk about that are against deep tilling.
Yep.
As far as you want to like basically they say deep tilling messes up the natural decomp of
Y-
the soil, different
Soil. Yep.
levels. Do you agree with
Yep.
that same kind of statement? I mean, do you think people should just hit the first couple of 4 or 5 inches when they do a till?
Yeah. So I've seen both sides of it, and both sides work. There's nothing wrong with either side. Tilling has its advantages because you can basically make a perfect seed bed for the seed to, be compacted right into it. I mean, it's putting it at the perfect depth,
Hmm.
and it's basically the best site that you could put seed into. Um, Now the no-till, it's that's good for um, you know, having that organic matter breakdown. It creates a mulch layer. It retains moisture better than tilling does, and it's got its advantages. But too, if you don't open up to the ground, you're gonna have to use more seed um, to get down to the dirt. Um, that's kind of the only thing I see about the no-till.
Hmm.
Um, if you can get it thin enough, though, when you're doing it, and you can have those little void spots in between all the little plants there. No-till works perfectly, and then you can cultipack over it, and it'll work just as well, if not better than tilling or breaking up the dirt. So, I mean, both of them have their advantages. It's to the user, I guess, if they only have time or only have the equipment to, you know, just go out there and I'm gonna round up this area, spread the seed, and then like take my four-wheeler and run over it a few times. I mean that works just as good as anything else around there. I mean, if you have a tractor with a rototiller on there, I mean, you're gonna make a perfect seed bed for that. I mean, that works well too. So moisture, um, that that's kind of the biggest factor too, retaining moisture. So Michigan's got a lot of sandy soils, so
So
it's
so getting
hard to go
getting
ahead. Sorry.
somebody no, you're fine. So getting in
Oh,
somebody, speaking of the soil and working it up right,
yep.
I've told people some things about putting seed down just trying to learn from you.
Okay.
Just so right now we have a clear understanding for people that are putting a food plot down.
Yep.
What are the steps from the time that you get your like, nice and brief, just so we can get people a
Yep.
clear idea of this. From the time that you decide you're gonna put a food plot down
Hmm.
to the time it's done, what's the steps that you need to do to get your soil as far as the tilling, then what you do after the tilling, and
Yep.
then your seed. So that because I've heard people
Okay.
say they thought, oh, I thought I'm supposed to do this step first, as far
Yeah.
as your cultipack and all that. So what is the right process of putting a food plot down from A to B?
So the first thing before you even break ground, the number one thing, and I don't care if you use red light seed, anybody else's seed, the elevator seed, the top, some of the bigger companies that sell food plot seed, is you got to do a soil test.
Hmm.
You can look at a ground and say, "Oh, this is perfect. I don't need to touch it." Do you really know that though for sure? Like, I thought, one of our food plots that we did not too long ago, it was next to a farm field that's been farmed for years. But I still did a soil test, and the pH was like 5.9. It was terrible. I mean, not that say that's terrible, but it's not where I like it.
Yeah.
And it's right next to a farm field that's been taken care of year after year, growing corn and soybeans, doing that rotation. So the number one thing I can tell anybody is you have to do a soil test, no matter if you say, "Oh, the ground's awesome" or not, because you never know what you're missing. And it could be that one thing that just makes your plot fail, though. You could be missing the potassium levels off. So your clover's not gonna grow very well, or the pH is off. So you're like, "Oh, I'm only gonna put down so much fertilizer because that's all I can afford," which is fine, but if you don't put down the right fertilizer, the right amount of lime to balance out the pH, you're you're throwing away your money, honestly. I mean, you
Yeah.
could throw seed on the ground and you're not putting the effort into it. So, That's the biggest thing I can say. Um, I guess once you figure out what your ground needs, putting the right recommended lime fertilizer down when you're going to either plant or before you plant, um, is neutralizing all the weeds too. Whether that's, I mean, herbicide is kind of the best way to neutralize any plant in there. You could rototill and rototill and rototill, but all you're doing is turning up the seed bed that's underneath there. So you're gonna pull up old seeds in there, and you could find yourself with a big mess, and you could just be fertilizing all the weeds that you just turned up. Um, if you're gonna do the no-till thing, you gotta still neutralize all the plants. So a good herbicide to take out the plants there is probably the best thing to do. So that would
Mhm.
probably be my number two thing.
Okay.
Um, and then from there, I guess number 3 would my biggest thing is find some way to set the seed into the ground, whether walking over it or finding a cultipacker of some kind, a lawn roller behind a garden tractor, something that will push the seed in the ground because
Now,
seed
quick
is soil.
quick question,
Yep,
just so
go ahead.
people don't get confused here. I've had people that go out there and they till up their stuff and
Yep,
then they throw their seed down.
yep.
So they have a
Okay,
fluffy seed bed. Then they're throwing a brassica on, which is a small seed. Then they're trying to
okay.
cultipack it. So,
So,
like, tell them the right steps as
okay,
far as that, because I think
okay.
a lot of guys are
All right.
having failed food plots because of that.
Yeah. So if you're gonna rototill and you got that fluffy seed bed, cultipack first. Reason being is if you do it when it's fluffy and you cultipack it, you know when you drive your tractor over how far down you sink. Brassica only needs to go a quarter of an inch. I mean, it just needs to be covered under the soil. So if you had a fluffy, you know, 3 4 inches that you just rototilled and you're got that, and then you throw your seed down and you cultipack it with a smaller seed like a clover or brassica, you're
Mhm.
gonna bury that seed way too deep. It's gonna have a really hard time germinating. It's not gonna be good. I mean, if you're gonna rototill or till or do something like that, it's till it up, get it as level as you can, cultipack it, then seed, then cultipack it one more time. That's the best thing you can do right there. So
Which
now
I don't even own a cultipacker, but all I did was drive over my tires
drive over.
enough,
Yep,
and then I threw
yep.
seed down, and then I drove over it again.
Or again, that's all you got. That's perfect. That's all you got to do. So, um, now for no-till though, because you're not doing anything to the ground, is that's where you can do that's where a lot of people get confused is they're like, well, which thing am I doing here? So if you're gonna do the no-till where you're not gonna till up the ground, you're gonna terminate the plants that are there existing. You'll seed into all those plants that are standing up. So that's another thing is make sure all the plants are standing up and all the thatch, all the low undergrowth or whatever, you want to kind of get that turned up a little bit just so the seed that you're planting falls down to the ground.
Mhm.
So, and if you terminate it and you have those openings or whatever, seed it and then just cultipack it or run over it or somehow you can push the seed. Seed to soil contact's a big thing. So to get the best germination out of your seed. So that would probably be my number 3 thing.
Okay.
So so if you can accomplish those 3 things, you will have great food plots. So
And then we're throwing fertilizer down with the seed, whatever fertilizer you
you
need.
yep, you can do it before um before the method I've been using, and it seems to work pretty well for me. I've only had a couple times where it kind of messed up, but if you fertilize half the amount first when you're tilling and everything, so it mixes into the soil, and then do all your work, and then when you seed, then fertilize it again with the rest of the amount, and then call to pack everything in. So then it's set. So you have nutrients not only at the top of the soil, but also in the soil too. So
Mhm.
it's you got nutrients throughout, so the roots can grab it and the plant can grab it. So
I mean, as far as brassica, um, I know last year I did it when I put it down, and then
Yep.
what was it 6 to 8 inches? Then you throw it down again right before it
Yep.
rain.
Yeah. Make sure you do it before you rain. Nitrogen, it can be, they call it too hot for the plants. It just means that nitrogen can burn the plants or burn the leaves and everything. So try to put nitrogen down just before rain, maybe a day before it rains. Um, Urea off gases a little bit, so it kind of loses a little bit of its touch. So try to shoot before a rain if you're gonna do it.
Okay.
So, um, but that's the I guess I can go in a little bit to that too. So the fertilizers too. I write all the fertilizers that work best with our mixes. I can't say it works for every mix across the board if you wanted to make your own, but for the most part, brassicas and grains need high nitrogen, um, and then equal amounts of potash and potassium there. And then clover needs lower amounts of nitrogen and higher amounts of P and K. So that's a big thing I see with the legumes. And legumes are, the soybeans, clovers, alfalfa, um, that kind of stuff. So you just got to understand the soil test will spell it out for you too for what the best nutrients are for what you want to plant. So that's why I always put the soil test as number one
Okay.
thing before you even do anything is just use that. So
Okay. All right. Well, Tony, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. Uh, Gave some awesome information. I think a lot of people that are going to listen to this or watch this are going to learn a lot about food plots. If anyone
Mhm.
has any questions about food plots, first of all, go to the Redlight Food Plot Seed page, Facebook page. Check them out. You can message Tony right on there. Any food plot questions, if you have questions about his seed mixes,
Mm.
get a hold of him. He's busy. He's a full time firefighter, so he but he will find time to get back to you. I promise you.
Yeah.
But as always, thank you for tuning in, Tony. Thank you for joining me
Yeah.
tonight again.
Thanks
Um,
for having me, Steve.
yep, it's been great. Episode 7 already.
Yeah.
We're moving around here. We're moving up fast. So um,
Yeah. It's
until
been
next
fun.
time,
Yeah.
until next time, Tony and myself, have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.